We told you in January that we will go to Mbombela, from Mbombela to Moses Mapida, from Moses Mapida to FNP. That's where we will come for Siyanqoba rally.
The African National Congress says it will easily fill up FNB Stadium when it holds its Siyanqoba rally this coming Saturday. ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula was addressing the media about the ruling party's readiness ahead of this rally, which will be the culmination of the party's election campaign.
Well, we are hosting a rally in his territory of Polokwane, and it is a tradition in the EFF that when you go into the area, you must go and salute the traditional leadership.
Also, EFF leader Julius Malema met with traditional leaders before addressing EFF supporters at the local sports ground in Molechi. This was in Limpopo as the party builds up towards the Tela Tupa rally on Saturday at the Peter Mokaba Stadium in Polokwane.
We expect to get around 25 seats in Parliament in this election. We expect to be the kingmakers in Gauteng and Northern Cape.
The Patriotic Alliance is hopeful it will obtain 25 seats in Parliament in the upcoming elections. PA's leader Gayton McKenzie was on the campaign trail in Kimberley in the Northern Cape.
So for the very last time on Elections 360 Daily, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to it. And today it's another conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, election observers are crucial in ensuring the fairness and integrity of elections. With so much at stake in the highly anticipated national and provincial elections, which are just about 6 days away, today we zone in on the role and importance of elections, as well as the observers, and what qualifications are needed, and what is the selection process, as well as the training for these observers. And these are some of the questions we will be tackling on the program today. My name is Mxolisi Masango, and I'm with Buhle Gelebe. How are you, Buhle?
I'm doing great, Mxolisi, and yourself?
All great.
It's been quite the journey.
Indeed.
Welcome as we take you through today's episode of Elections 360 Daily. Less than a week left before the country goes to the polls to choose its leaders. Remember that you too can be a part of the conversation by calling us on 011-714-0729 or hit us up on social media. Our X handle is @SABC Izindaba. Our hashtag is #Elections360Daily. Over 100 organizations will be observing South Africa's general elections. Among those, 5,000 are international observers. They include the African Union, Carter Center Democracy Program, International Democracy, and Southern African Development Community. SABC's international editor, Sophie Mukwena, has more.
SADC observes elections in its member states based on the revised SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. All SADC member states affirmed their commitment to the implementation of these principles and guidelines.
The regional bloc has made a humble appeal to the political parties during these heavily contested elections.
South Africa is well known for a culture of peaceful elections at the national level. Our mission, therefore, expects this culture to persist during and beyond this electoral cycle.
The head of the mission has further called on South Africans to go out in their numbers to vote.
SADC urges all registered voters to participate their civic and political rights by going out to vote on the 29th May 2024. We encourage all stakeholders to ensure that these elections are conducted in a peaceful, free, fair, transparent, and credible manner.
Sophie Mukwena, SABC News, Johannesburg.
As you've just heard on that package, observers from the Southern African Development Community and the African Union have arrived in South Africa to observe the 29 May elections. The Groundwork Collective, a civic organization founded by Mbali Ntuli, launched its independent elections observation portal and encouraging registered South Africans to sign up as independent election observers ahead of the May 29 elections, nationally and provincially. Mbali Ntuli joins us now via Teams for the discussion, and we are also in studio with Sophie Mukwena, international editor right here at the SABC, who joins us to talk about the observer mission. Welcome both to Elections 360. To the both of you, my first question, from the name, it sounds simple enough, but what is the actual role of observers, both international and local? I'll start with you, Mbali.
Thank you so much for having me, and good evening to Ms. Sophie. It's great to be on the same platform with her. So often what we've seen in any democratic countries is that they have the practice of having observers. But South Africa is very unique, I think, on our continent, that we don't only have the ability for ordinary South Africans to choose to be observers, but also we invite international organizations, our fellow sort of SADC members and others from the continent to also come and observe our elections. And I think it's because it was such a hard-won democracy that we want to make sure that we always protect it. But certainly we are quite unique, I think, even in around the world, at how participatory our legislation allows it for any ordinary South Africa to be able to observe what happens on the day of the elections. And essentially what observers do is that they are there to maintain the integrity of the elections. We don't monitor in a way that has any kind of intervention, but we are there to be able to escalate any irregularities that we may be able to see, if the wrong people are not supposed to be there. There's a number of different things that observers have to look out for, that we train them beforehand. But ours is to help the IEC, is to help our democracy by making sure that everything happens as it should, and that should there be any questions that are raised afterwards, we are also able to be another source of information of what actually happened on that day. And I'm very, very happy that this is something that is becoming more part of our culture democratically, because we had it for a while just after 1994, and then I think everyone assumed that our democracy was okay, and so we didn't see a lot of observer missions happening. Now with the amount of contestation that we see happening, I think people are again enthused to make sure that we protect our democracy as much as possible.
Thank you, Mbali. Sophie, could you also please comment on what this role means of these observers internationally and locally?
Well, when you look at international observers, it is, as Mbali pointed out, a trend on the continent to have them when there are elections in Africa. I think there's huge interest on the continent. You always see international observers going to countries where there are elections, because there's also some thinking around the level or the quality of democracy you have in Africa, and you'll see people having interest in monitoring or observing elections in African countries. But when you go to countries in Europe, in America, you see that most of the observers are local observers. And because there's this misnomer that Europe and America, they are a mature democracy. But we saw what happened the last elections in the United States of America, particularly the presidential election, where there was heavy contestation. But in Africa, people just think that things are not that up to the democracy level, that people must be monitored and there must be observation missions. And well, it's good because sometimes it gives more credibility to the process. For example, I want to cite an example of Kenya. In 2017, I was in Kenya during that disputed elections. And fortunately, the former South African President Thabo Mbeki was one of the leaders who were part of leaders who led the mission there. And therefore, when there was that tension, you had two senior former presidents one from Ghana, one from South Africa, who were able to speak to the candidates who were at loggerheads, Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, and encourage them to use the illegal processes. And they did that, and then there was a rerun, and that helped. You go to Malawi in 2020, there was a dispute. Again, Mbeki was there. He was able to advise behind the scenes that use the democratic means. So you are able to arrest the situation so that it doesn't lead to conflict. And therefore, when you have these observers, for example, the AU observer mission in South Africa will be headed by Uhuru Kenyatta. You have Goodluck Jonathan, who will be in the country also as part of another team. And therefore, it will help if there are these disputes when you have this senior citizens of the continent to not to interfere but to advise stakeholders. And therefore, this is what has been happening on the continent. And it's good that this time around, when there's this heavy contestation in South Africa, you have some senior African citizens, former heads of states, who can come in and speak to stakeholders behind the scenes without interfering.
Now, the SADC and the AU are sending fully fledged election missions. Does that mean that conversely mean that there's concerns about the freeness and the fairness of these elections in South Africa?
Not at all. As you heard earlier on, the head of the SADC mission, a former vice president, yesterday, he pointed out that South Africa is known for free and fair elections. And therefore, they know and they are hoping that that trend will continue. He even went as far as saying that the way we handle our elections, we continuously improve, citing an example of how I was surprised that the whole continent was following the coverage of SABC on the international stage in terms of the South African citizens who went to the polls last weekend, and they were saying that they were taken aback how South Africans were really there, even though they are not in the country, to ensure that they do participate in this election. So you can see that there's a lot that they learn also when they come to observe our elections. And therefore, yes, there's always room for disappointments here and there, but overall, there's this belief, and that is why you do have international observers who are coming. But compared to the groups who came in 1994, I'm actually surprised that it's
quickly
better.
park the conversation right there. Let's quickly go to an ad break. Umxolisi continues with the conversation right here on Elections 360 Daily.
Right, so thank you for staying with us. You're still tuned into Elections 360 Daily. So the Groundwork Collective, this is a civic organization founded by Mbali Ntuli, launched its independent election observation portal, encouraging registered South Africans to sign up as independent election observers. This is ahead of the May the 29th national and provincial elections. Let's quickly hear from these observers about why they joined the mission and the importance for young people to join observer missions.
I'm Tivan, I'm 28 years old, and I decided to volunteer with Groundwork Collective because I think it's important to ensure that elections are free and fair. And I understand that we share the responsibility of protecting our democratic institutions. I'm going to vote in this election, and I urge all young people to vote because our interests have to be represented. Very many people paid a very high price for us to enjoy a democratic system of government in this country.
Msangapti from Limpopo, GWC coordinator, guys. I just want to reach to the fellow South African youth, elder people, those who register to vote. Let's go out in numbers because we have registered for change, guys. If we say we register for change, let's go and maintain our change by voting. Let's go out in numbers. Let's make sure we vote for the right political party or anything that we're going to vote for, guys. Let's make sure we maintain this democracy. Let's go out. Let's reach out. Let's tell people to go out and vote.
My name is Madladile Bajra, Crown Red Collective Observer from the Free State. I would like to encourage everybody to go out and vote, as every vote counts, guys. Let's go out and cast our vote and exercise our fundamental right as citizens of a democratic society. I think it is very important to go out and vote, guys. It is very important and crucial, as every vote counts. Also, I'm an observer on a mission because I want to contribute in upholding the democratic process of our country and ensuring that every eligible citizen gets a chance to cast their vote. See you on the 29th.
So we continue our discussion about election observers with Groundwork Collective founder Mbali Ntuli, who joins us virtually. And in studio, we are joined by Sophie Mokoena, the SABC News International Editor. So, Sophie, let's talk about the composition of these observers and what actually informs it, and how is this composition decided on?
Let's take, for example, the SADC, our regional organization. You have members of this mission from different countries in the SADC region, all member states: Tanzania, Malawi, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Mozambique, DRC, except for South Africa because elections are happening in South Africa. Secondly, these are men and women who have received proper training in terms of what to do based on SADC protocols. The protocol on elections demands that countries do run free and fair elections, and therefore that's their responsibility to collect information before elections, during voting and post-elections, and send a report to the Secretariat, and then that report will be presented to the heads of state and government of SADC so that they can see in terms of what needs to be strengthened in terms of elections in the member countries. And the same with your AU, it will be people from different countries, not just maybe people from the AU Commission. And therefore, they are doing the same work. The same with the EU observer missions. It's member states of the EU, different countries from Europe. And therefore, the UN, as the world body, they do send observers, or they use their offices, the regional offices or continental offices, to do the same. And therefore, it's all about ensuring that there's democracy in the world, but secondly, you make recommendations post-elections how countries can improve their electoral processes, including the political parties, the Electoral Commission, and just the citizen, the broadcaster. As we speak, all the observers are monitoring SABC, whether we're doing the right thing as per the mandate of the broadcaster, in line with ICASA, but also in line with the SADC protocol.
Yeah, and Mbali, to bring you back into the fold as well, let's just quickly talk about some of the key learnings, a progress report, if you may, from some of the previous missions, and what were some of the conversations that are being had at this point in terms of trying to fine-tune some of the things, as well as the lessons that were learned from the previous initiative.
Thank you. So we really have taken a different stance because ours has been part of a longer campaign, which has been our exchange campaign, and primarily rooted in actually first getting young people to have registered. So we've been running this campaign for a year. We wanted to get young people registered. Then we wanted to take them through a curriculum of how the government actually works. And then instead of being passive, we then wanted them to do something active as part of their democracy as the first step, and observing was a part of that. So we've taken it from that as opposed to looking completely at what other missions have done before. And that's because we've tried to do it differently so that young people can feel that they can actually find themselves and locate themselves in the way that we want them to participate in our democracy. Obviously, one of the things to Gwenna's point is that we are also compiling information both pre-elections, that we've been doing focus groups, we've been doing a lot of looking at any type of disinformation campaigns, anything that could affect what could be termed the credibility of the election going forward. And one of the things that we also came up with was a very innovative mobile application that is going to allow people to be able to give us live feedback on the day that we'll then be able to compile.
Okay, time for us to now take a quick break. We're back with you straight after this as Buhle winds down this conversation. Stay with us.
We are wrapping up our election observer mission conversation with our guests and asking them their final words as we close off to all South Africans who will be voting on the 29th of May. The one common goal is free and fair elections. What role can voters play in assisting observers to fulfill their duties? I'll start with you, Mbali, a quick one, closing comment.
I think it's very important that South Africans realize how participatory our democracy is and how participatory our legislation is. One of the things that we can all do on election day is to give up some of our time to help and to go and observe, join accredited missions, or do it on your own. You can get accreditation with the IEC as part of your duty to make sure that our elections are going to be free and fair and to help your country. And I think that going forward, we also need to see far more people actually coming out on election day. So I hope that everyone's prepared to go out, get their kids, their daughters, and everyone else, because this is going to be one of the most important elections, and a lot of it is going to depend on the turnout and, of course, on how much we as citizens are willing to engage with the process afterwards.
Thank you so much, Mbali. Sophie, your last comment towards elections?
One thing as South Africa that we have to pride ourselves with is since 1994, we've had peaceful and free and fair elections. I think it was upon the political parties to ensure that we don't drop the ball. The IEC, the same. All of us with different responsibility, the media, because we play a very important role in strengthening the democracy that we have. And also the most important part of this, the citizens of this country. It's your responsibility, it is your voice, it is your country. You are the real people, the people who are supposed to protect and ensure that democracy thrives. And therefore, I think on election day, all of us will be out there doing our responsibilities, and the international observers will be there also, the local observers. And I think what Mbali and them have done, it's a good thing, because we need young people to take charge and lead the way in terms of what's happening in the country.
Thank you so much, Sophie Mugwena, International Editor Writer at the SABC, and Mbali Ntuli. We have come to the end of this episode, and the last episode actually of Elections 360 Daily. What a phenomenal time of learning.
Yeah, it's certainly been a pleasure to journey with South Africans as we talk through their lived experiences. And as you've heard there, it's all up to you now to go cast your X and make that difference. From myself, Olisi Masango, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Goodbye.